What exactly is a self-made person? See, we see a lot of humans, a lot of people nowadays calling themselves self-made. See, this is a funny concept that was designed in the same series of concepts that make no sense, uh, well, to most people, except those that have a very limited perspective of the world. See, something self made, you can only talk about creation itself. Because one day creation didn't exist and poof, it simply came into existence through the force of thousands of, hundreds of thousands of beings that took part in the creation of this cosmos. But when you look at something self made, see, every object that you look and see around is something very simple, right? Atoms and molecules with a certain memory that tells them somehow how to sit, how to be, how to connect one with the other so that they create the objects that you can perceive through your senses, right? When you take a closer look, you will see that even those atoms and molecules of each of these objects around, they swing from existence into inexistence, right? So sooner or later, each of those objects is never going to be the same object again, though it looks the same for you. Similarly, when you go to bed and you wake up, you're definitely not the same human again, because many of your cells may have died, others took their place, right? You're definitely still serving the same thoughts and ideas, but that is part of what you call a persona, right? See, when you speak about self made, what is it that you can self make about yourself? Well, definitely you didn't give birth to yourself, yes? And if we think a bit about your persona is a result of the accumulation of thoughts, opinions, ideas, knowledge, wisdom from others, which you juggled through your lifetime in your mind, right? Which what we call introspection. And you came up with different or you followed the same points of view and ideas, which slowly and surely guided you towards being your what you call your persona. But it is never a self-made because every resource that you will ever use existed there before you. It was created by other people, so from a certain standpoint, it still carries their energy, right? When you look at your parents, a lot of the dumb parents will say, I made you so I can kill you, right? It's a silly belief, but you know, even your parents say they made you. You needed two adults, right? You needed two people to give birth to you. So it is nothing else but a silly agenda, a silly thought that it is put in people's minds because we live in a sick society, right? What does a sick society do? Well, a sick society is always obsessed with keeping people busy because the more busy you keep them, the more drowned you keep them in information, they will simply give up any hope. And once they do, well, they will simply live like zombies, right? When you look at most people, they're just rushing nowhere. And the problem is that these people, having given up hope, they're just expecting some recognition still because life seeks a certain way. When there is an emotional income, you will obsessively do whatever triggered that emotional income, right? Because many people, most people, live life in a very numbed down way because emotions are what give you your power, right? When these emotions are stripped from you because this sick society excels at being overly repetitive, right? It is always repetitive, nothing new happens, right? Especially with cancel culture, you are forced to believe the same silly values that the sick society imposes upon you, right? It's not called freedom because it is imposed upon you, right? Now, it is not imposed like in an authoritarian regime. It is still an authoritarian regime, but it is a more perverted one, which allows people to embrace their slavery instead of being forced into slavery, right? After the 19th, actually the 20th century, the Sikh society swapped from making use of wounded masculine energy to wounded feminine. It invites people into their own suffering, right? It invites people into the sickness of this society, cuddles them with it until they are convinced that it is the only way, and then it simply teaches them how to drown themselves in their own sorrows, right? Isn't that wounded feminine? Wounded masculine is about trying to take vengeance, right? Keeping you under an iron fist. Wounded feminine is about inviting you into the other people's misery, right? Where do you see this? Well, You see it in femme fatale movies, and well, if you're unfortunate and you invite the wrong people in your life with wounded feminine energy, typically narcissists or people with narcissistic tendencies, you will see they function extremely similar to this sick society. Because ultimately, what is a sick society other than the, well, collective result of its deviance, right? Because when people deviate from the morals of nature, the morals of which and through which we have been created, then obviously you become a deviant. When you become a deviant, everything makes logics to you. Everything is logical to you, right? Because deviants and people who give up hope, they simply can't care anymore whether something is good or bad because they are convinced that they are not worthy of anything, most likely from childbirth, because that's how a sick society controls you. Give it your entire power. Everything in a sick society is warped into that, right? Because sooner or later, it all becomes a business. Your religion is nothing else but a business, more or less. A lot of people simply function in the idea of a zombie religion. They just do their chores, they do whatever. You see them wearing crosses, they go to the mosque, they pray whatever rituals, whatever their religion implies more or less. But they just do it because there's a mechanism, there's a machination of process within their minds. They're just doing it unconsciously. Once people lose all hope or give up all hope, once people are convinced that they are not worthy of literally any bit of recognition in a sick society, they will simply seek to do something specifically so that they receive that, right? They will obsessively seek to gain some bit of attention, which more or less leads to narcissism and its idea of self-breeding, right? Or let's not call it self-breeding. Well, it is in a way self-bred because you end up with some ideas, you invest in those ideas, and then the more you invest, it becomes like a snowball, right? You allow it to roll enough, it becomes, bigger and bigger because it draws upon even more snow and even more snow, right? That is how suffering is made. You can say that your suffering, in part, it is self-made. Your personality is definitely not, because when you are born, you came without any expectations, any attachments, any thoughts, even. Yes? Many unconscious things you may still have from previous lifetimes, but life makes it so that everything is kept under a barrier. So when you learn certain things, you have a feeling that you already knew those because you only reactivated that knowledge from other sources. You may have heard it during the same life or during previous lifetimes. Let's say that that is not important. But once you learn something, you learn it from a different source, right? So your knowledge is not self-made, right? The whole cosmos, when it came into existence, it came also with the entirety of the wisdom and the intelligence and the knowledge of all of its possibilities. But a sick society obviously wants you to stay away from that because what happens when you become knowledgeable of your inside? You become knowledgeable of the fact that you have the whole history of the cosmos within you. You need a lot of balance and stability to access it, yes, but it is still there within you. If a sick society fails to hide that from you, well, you will crave learning history other than what you are being taught. Because meaning in the end in this whole society, what is it other than a collective consensus, right? You see this sick society is inventing newer and newer terms. They only make sense to people who lack any sort of attention. And they will gladly seek to follow that because they will think that they are surrounded by like-minded people, which who in turn will give them some bit of attention, right? And these weak-minded people, they will simply live in a pseudo collective where everyone thinks that they're loved by the others. Everyone will think that they are like-minded and they will receive the appreciation, but they don't care about themselves, so obviously they won't care much about the others. It is an interesting way to create a prison because when people think alike, they will enjoy this comfort even more. They will find it easier to entice themselves into discomfort. But I've been saying it, and many other wise voices also. When you are surrounded by people who think alike, well, obviously you're living in a prison. When people function, think, and do things the same way, everyone does the things the same way. That kind of stinks of a prison, right? Especially if things are of an ignorant nature, of a repulsive nature, of a separatist nature, right? Because only someone with a separatist mind can think that something was self made, right? Only creation is self made. All these resources, they once didn't exist, and sooner or later they came into existence, right? Only the first bit of creation, right? When creation entered physicality, that is what was self made. Because, well, was it self made ultimately? Or other forces beyond our comprehension made them, right? So, in the end, everything in physicality is the result of something else. Everything in physicality exists in a way because time allows it, right? Physicality is, in a way, a consequence of time because everything has a certain time. Some things live longer than others. Some people may live longer than others, but time will simply take its toll sooner or later, right? So everything in a way is a proof of time because when time exists, physicality also exists. Time can also exist in a different manner beyond physicality, but the point is something self-made, well, to counter what I initially presented as self-made, creation, self-made. Well, we say God created things, yes? So creation itself is not self-made, yes? The entities that led to the creation of this universe, entities which we don't know of, but we collectively call as God, or creation, or any other such concept, well, we will never be able to mentally perceive how they were created, and in their level beyond physicality, whether they were unconsciously created by themselves, and nothingness simply shaped itself into a very feeble form of existence, which is entirely non-physical. Yes, it does. They may not even have a shape, right? They might just be a concept. But these forces led to the creation of the cosmos, and the cosmos is a direct um, result of their creation. Everything in this cosmos is the direct result of creation which perpetrates itself. The laws of its functioning were designed, yes? So, since its design, these laws constantly continued the idea of creation coming to life, turning into something else. And sooner or later, more conscious forms of existence came into being, which shaped the resources that they had at their disposal. So ultimately, everything in a way is the result of a collective agreement, right? Of a collective struggle. And, well, even atoms, right? They are under the influence of, they are under the influence of memory, right? Memory is a fundamental law of the universe that states how things will behave in a certain way for a specific result, right? So even matter, everything that we see around is the result of these laws of the cosmos. So they are definitely not self-made. They just react to the song of this cosmos. Because we've seen even through our own science, our limited science, that even matter itself, what is it? Isn't it something else but a Brownian movement? What is this Brownian movement? Well, we call it a randomized movement because, well, we don't see much of a pattern in it. But what is it ultimately, other than a dance to the music of the cosmos, right? Because when this whole universe sings, everything that is in connection with it can't be otherwise than dancing, right? Why do you say, even in English, which is kind of an emotionally flat language, why do you say, my heart sings, right? I feel my heart racing, I feel my heart dancing, right? When you feel so joyous, what is it that you feel like? You feel like dancing, right? But when a sick society strips you of all your power and all your emotion because everything becomes a business and you must become its slave, sooner or later, right? What is it that you seek? Well, you don't seek anything because you're fully convinced that nothing can give you joy, right? When you feel like that, obviously you will struggle for the attention. You will struggle for realization and the reward that comes through it, financially or, well, especially emotionally. Because you can get all the money in the world. If you're depressed, more or less it won't even matter, right? If you're sick to a certain extent, still it won't matter, right? You may splurge some of that money, but you know deep inside you're still not fulfilled, right? You can buy all the objects in the world. They will most likely not buy any long lasting happiness, regardless. And the money sooner or later will finish, right? You will run out of it if you don't know how to invest them into becoming much better. So when we look at this idea of self-made, well, you definitely weren't self-born. You needed two adults to give birth to you, or let's say two humans to give birth to you, right? Your talents and everything you've learned, you learned from other people, directly or indirectly, right? Even if you are a guru that is in perfect communion with the wisdom and the knowledge of the cosmos, you still acknowledge that that is part of the cosmos. It is not you, right? You're just making use of it. And ultimately, well, when you're a guru or someone who is, let's say, somewhat, at least somewhat enlightened, you know you have to keep a certain distance from the mind and, well, what we call the mind, your ideas, your thoughts, and the obsession that the unconscious mind can have, the influence that the unconscious mind can have on you, that you must always seek something better. Whatever you're doing, it's never enough. You must seek something better, right? This is how life unconsciously functions. So when you receive nothing for what you think you have created, you will become obsessive with receiving attention. So whatever you end up creating, sooner or later, unconsciously, you will feel an obsession to call it that it is created by you, right? You are the result of all the deeds that you did and all the happenings that you went through, all the struggles that you either ignored or you worked to work around, to find a way around, to bypass and to succeed over, right? So all of these things that happened to you, you did that thanks to the energies that you have in your body. Those energies were supplemented with the food that you eat, with the air that you breathe, with the water that you drink. So obviously all of these resources you're making use of. But because you're ignorant to these ideas, to how you breathe, to even to the fact that you're breathing. Yes, there are people who are ignorant to their breath, to the fact that, well, they're even eating. What you're eating is information that comes to your body. So you can't call yourself at all self-made because you are a result, especially the more unconscious you are. You need to be unconscious to think that anything within you is self-made, right? Self-made is a concept that only functions for people who are ignorant, who are separatist by design, because they will think that something that was created is their result and their result alone, right? It is a lack of understanding of the world. It is a lack of understanding the unitedness of the components of this existence, because everything in the cosmos functions in tune one with the other. It is a perfect mechanism and it functions whatever way it can. Whether you remove some of its cogs, it will find others, don't worry, because creation has its own laws. It will put into existence what it needs, because that's how evolution functions. Something is needed enough, well, it will be a reality sooner or later. That is how some animals, some forms of life on this planet evolved from aquatic to terrestrial. That is why some ended up conquering the skies, right? That is how we humans ended up conquering the resources of this world. Not because the God up there in heaven told us to, but because unconsciously we sought to do that, right? 200 years ago, people were dreaming about flying. Nowadays, people are ignorant to that because it is somewhat normal. When you make misery and suffering normal, everything is expectable to people. Whatever new change comes, they will embrace it because they will hope that they will get some attention from that. So they will think ultimately that if they have created something, it is only their result, it is their victory, right? So hopefully this video raised a bit of awareness. Take care, enjoy life. And this being said, Ferenc Board signing out.